Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome again to the Gary Neville Podcast at the end of an epic encounter, I guess. So that's not overstating it, Gary, is it? Between Arsenal, who've gone back to the top of the table, and Liverpool, who are in the middle of the table.
Yeah, we've got Liverpool today. We've got Liverpool next week against Manchester City. And ahead of that, came down to London last night thinking that this couldn't be anything other than a really good game of football and exciting, and also tell us about where both teams are at. We're sort of continually searching for more tests for Arsenal, thinking that have they got the backbone, will they fall away, are they the real deal? But they continue to keep showing up, and for Liverpool, is this a blip or is it a bit of a decline in terms of how they are at this moment in time?
What do you think?
Well, look, starting with Liverpool, I mean, the first half, I thought they responded really well to an electric start. We've seen Arsenal from the very first moment of the season against Crystal Palace. Some of the football in the first 20 minutes of that match from them up front was absolutely breathtaking, with Jesus and Saka, Martinelli, absolutely brilliant, with Ødegaard in behind. And I thought they could get blown away here. In fact, I said to you just before kick-off, the team that Jurgen Klopp's picked could see them get done here if they're not careful. However, I thought Liverpool responded in the first half really well through Thiago and Henderson getting control of the game. And Nunez's runs in behind Gabriel in particular were causing problems, and they got that goal back. But then that goal to concede on half-time, I think Jamie Carragher did a piece on Monday Night Football about Liverpool being susceptible to counter-attack. They have a free kick well into injury time. They try and swing it in, and then all of a sudden they get counter-attacked on. There's an initial challenge by Thiago, which isn't good enough. And then Henderson gets caught in that right channel, but then Trent Alexander-Arnold really makes a poor decision to go and sweep up behind Henderson. And from that moment on, I have to say, second half, I thought that was worrying, that second half for Liverpool. They were a shadow of themselves in terms of...
And yet they did get it back to 2-2 pretty quickly.
They did. They got back in the game, which you think, well, what a great response. But generally, their performance in the second half will be a worry for Jurgen Klopp. Not just the performance in terms of on the ball and how they played, but also off the ball. Their ability to be able to get to the ball and press and harass. There was a point 5-6 years ago when Pochettino was at Tottenham and Liverpool, and obviously Klopp was at Liverpool, where I'd not seen pressing and aggressive hunting down of the ball like that before. And we knew that Jurgen Klopp came to this country with heavy metal football being the actual premise and principle. But that's not heavy metal football. That's like bass guitar. You know, it's really, really lethargic in the second half. You put that age graphic up partway through the second half, which said average age of Arsenal 24, average age of Liverpool nearly 28. I think it was 27.
18th in the Premier League.
Yeah. And sometimes a team can grow a little bit old together. That's the first time I've seen Liverpool since Old Trafford live. And you obviously have watched them on television, but when you see live, you see everything on the pitch, and you just see how they're moving, how they're working, and how they're operating together. And I'd be concerned if I was Liverpool fan, coach, player in that second half, because even the substitutions were a little bit strange. Salah coming off. I mean, obviously, I think Trent had to come off at half-time, even if he wasn't injured. But Salah coming off, then Jota coming off, and ending up with needing a goal with Harvey Elliott left wing, Jordan Henderson right wing, just felt a little bit strange. And yeah, look, they've got enough credit in the bank, this Liverpool team and this Liverpool manager. I think this Liverpool manager's done the best job of any manager in this last 6-7 years, just with what he's had to work with in terms of budget compared to the rest. So they've got enough credit in the bank for us not to go wild on them and start to say that it's the end of Liverpool. That's not the case here. But there are concerns and there are worrying signs that things just are nowhere near. And actually, it's not the performance, or even the results sometimes. It's the actual energy and the appetite in the games that they've had over the last few years to go and defend and hunt and press.
And you can do that when you're so used to winning, which they have been. And now they're not losing that much, but they've lost a day, but they're not winning. And that takes the edge off that kind of attitude you have to believe in when you go and press.
Yeah, and look, I've not looked at every single statistic on the running stats, and Jurgen Klopp may have, and his sports science team and coaches might have statistics to say they're running as far as they used to, they're sprinting as much as they used to. But to the eye, it looks nothing like it used to in terms of how they're hunting and, you know, moving together as a unit, all squeezing across to one side, all squeezing up to a space. They look like they're just that 3 or 4 yards, you said it, 2 or 3 yards off. And 2 or 3 yards in football is everything. If you're a yard off someone, if you're a yard off a world-class player, it's too much. So Liverpool being 2 yards off where they were, just feels very stark to the eyes when you're watching it in that second half, because they didn't come out in that second half. I know they got back into the game, so it's a strange thing to say, but Arsenal were by far the better team in that game in the second half and deserved to win in the end.
One other issue, we'll go on to Arsenal, which they deserve us to go on to, but Darwin Núñez is a different kind of frontman, number 9, to the actual number 9. Bobby Firmino's had that role for such a long time. Is that confusing the issue as well? It means they can't actually play identically the way they played now that they've got Núñez, who was very good today, by the way, wasn't he?
I thought he was really good. I thought even in the difficult parts of the game for Liverpool, he was the best player. His runs were good. Liverpool needed a centre-forward. You know, Mane leaving, Firmino, obviously, I think people who watch him far more than I do saying that, you know, maybe he's the one that's just dropping off a little bit. So they had to revitalise that front three. We know Jota had come in last season and Diaz, Jota was 2 seasons ago, wasn't he? But Diaz was last season. But you know that they needed a centre-forward. I mean, when people signed Núñez, there was this comparison at the start of the season, Haaland, Núñez, who would do the best? These two young strikers.
He scored in the Community Shield against City, and Haaland didn't.
Exactly, and I remember the headlines around that time. We all should. And look at us now, 3 months later. But that was a debate. That sending off that he had against Crystal Palace, I think, has knocked him, there's no doubt. But I thought there were really good signs from Núñez today. I thought he looked a real handful up there, making good runs in behind, pressing, but something's missing. I know Liverpool fans are saying it's the midfield. They're having to play 4 up front now, I think, to compensate for the fact that they haven't got that energy in midfield anymore to try and get the press on. But that press fell away. When they didn't have the ball, Liverpool, they got to a point 3 years ago, they went from Jurgen Klopp's journey has been frantic, heavy metal, almost like what's going on, to a measured, brilliant team in possession and out of possession, where actually they would pick the times to press, but they became a far better team on the ball and in possession, to now a team look like that they actually want to play slowly on the ball and not do the other bit. They've almost gone like from a transition of sort of frantic, balance of frantic and composure and football, to now the other side of it, which is just they want the composed football. They don't want the frantic bit anymore. They need to get that frantic bit back, because that's the bit that everyone really falls in love with Jurgen Klopp's teams. It's the bit that I would say, which team do you prefer to watch, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool or Pep Guardiola's Manchester City? Up until this season, I'm always saying Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, because it's a style of play that resonates with me more than the one that Pep Guardiola plays. Just felt more like the style of play I used to play in. I can't see Pep Guardiola's style of football. It's just genius in itself. You have to be a certain technical type of player and maybe mindset to feel it and see it. But now I'm seeing the sort of what would be the physical drop in Jurgen Klopp's team, which means that then they just become a team that's almost like a shadow of where they were. And that's not writing them off, because they could come back and have a brilliant week, but they've got Rangers in midweek, they've got Manchester City next Sunday at home. And look, this Liverpool team could easily go and win those 2 matches. There's a lot more life in these players, a lot more life in Jurgen Klopp, but there were some signs in that second half that I just thought, not sure. Núñez wasn't the problem today. He wasn't the problem. There were other areas in the team. I just thought a physical drop-off in that second half was the biggest problem to me, and Arsenal just looking better and stronger and fitter.
And younger.
Yeah, they just looked better. They just looked, like they're a team that's going like that, and Liverpool looked like a team that were on the way down. Simple as that in the second half. I don't want the headline from what I've just said here to be this is the end of Liverpool. I don't believe that is the case. But it did look like a struggle for them physically in that second half compared to Arsenal.
Well, Arsenal wanting to rise, how much has that meant? They've won other games. They beat the North London derby. They won against Spurs last weekend with a certain amount of emphasis as well. But today they were challenged more, and they've still come out on the right side. So how do you assess where they are, as well as being top of the table?
I think it's really promising, because actually Liverpool came back against them today. Tottenham came back against them last week to equalise at 1-1. So they've been challenged in both games against really good teams. Teams that, if you're not right, will cause you a big problem. And look, I've questioned Arsenal's resilience and would they fall away last season. I think part way through I said I'm not sure they've got it to get to the end, and in the end they did fall away. It was an alarming drop-off in that last period of the season where they actually lost their confidence and they looked like they really were feeling the pressure of having to qualify for the Champions League. And I thought at that time it would be a really difficult period. I thought it was difficult for Mikel Arteta to actually come back from that. I wasn't the only one. But I have to say, the recruitment in the summer, the start to the season, winning the games that they're now winning. Obviously, they lost at Old Trafford, but winning against Tottenham
They
at
played
home.
well at Old Trafford
But
as well.
They played well. They
Yeah.
played well. But let's say, other than that, you think about the fact they've beat Liverpool, they've beat Tottenham. They're big games for Arsenal Football Club. And look, I don't think they'll win the league. Let's be really clear. I think Manchester City will win this league by a street in the end. I know that they're not even top at this moment in time, but I just feel like they could just go like that. And Arsenal are having to be at full pelt to stay with them. But it's good signs. It's good signs. But the tough part of the season for Arsenal is still to come. We've got this season that's going to feel like an age when the World Cup separates it in the winter. And then they're going to come back after that. And you just don't know. We could be sat here in February where they're challenging for top four, and all of a sudden the experience of other teams, maybe Chelsea or, obviously Liverpool could sort of start to rise a little bit. There's a long way to go. This is not a time to get carried away if you're an Arsenal fan. But there's definitely a spirit building. There's definitely something in this stadium where these fans can see a team and a manager that are going places. But feet on the ground, an injury to Jesus, an injury to Saliba, something like that. I know any team could be in that position, but it could become more difficult at certain points in the season. Those difficult moments haven't come yet, but there's no doubt that Arsenal are a team that I really enjoy watching them at this moment in time. They look fantastic, and I have to say, I thought today they deserved it, and they played against a really outstanding Liverpool team of the last 5 years, and they look better than them.
6 weeks today, England play Iran, and we've had Bukayo Saka become the match winner. We've had the other side with Trent Alexander-Arnold injured and out of sorts, really. Ben White, a lot of the English influences now will be looking forward to how Gareth Southgate beds that in after a terrible run with the team. But just talk about Saka, because, I said when he scored at the end of the first half, he's hardly had a touch, really. And then he had the touch that put them 2-1 up, and then he was part of the revival, or the going strength to strength in the second half. And then taking the penalty with all the pressure. Every time he takes a penalty, I referred to it in the commentary, the Euro final, will always come back to that. Mentally strong, physically gifted. What a talent.
He is a big talent, tough kid. When you watch him, he just looks like he wants the ball all the time. He shows for the ball all the time. He's enthusiastic. He brings life to the crowd. He sparks the crowd. Everything that you'd want in a young wide player. He works back. He's tenacious. He's a really, really good player. A really, really fantastic player. And I have to say, I thought he was quiet in the first half, but Liverpool were better in that period of the game. But he still hangs in there. He's still doing his job. And then second half, he comes stronger. And the penalty's a big moment. I mean, we were feeling it here. The crowd anticipation. Liverpool's experienced players obviously delaying the penalty as much as they could to put pressure on him. Alisson's a huge presence. I didn't actually watch the penalty on there. I watched it from the TV shots from that really brilliant camera angle that we have, and you just see the size of Alisson in front of him, and you think, if he dives the right way, he's probably going to save it.
He did dive the right
way.
He
did dive the right way and didn't save it, and that tells you how well he's hit that penalty. So yeah, well done to Saka. He's a breath of fresh air. You can't not like anything that he does, because even if he has a bad game, he's one of them that's always there. He's both of them, Martinelli on one side, Saka on the other. They're fantastic young wide players. They're a bit of a throwback as well, because they play quite wide. They're not necessarily sort of the ones that play like inside right, inside left strikers. They do play wider in their positions, and they take people on. And no, they're really good. I love watching them play. Last season, Aubameyang leaves in January. Lacazette doesn't give them that same energy that that ultimately Jesus does. All of a sudden, you put Jesus up there as the link, as the sort of target man, as the person who they can play off. And then all of a sudden, it's just lit up the rest of them and made the rest of them look what they can be. We knew the promise of these players was there in Ødegaard and Saka and Martinelli and Smith Rowe. We knew the promise was there. But I think what Jesus has now done is just knitted them together and made them look as electric, or even more electric, because they've got that player now who can just be so... Jesus is a 5'10" target man. He backs into people, he holds people off, he turns people, he rolls them, he pops it off to people. He's a brilliant centre forward. He runs the channels, he runs the sides, he hunts down and presses. He's fantastic, and that is the player that's changed Arsenal and made those young players even more promising than they already were.
Let's change tack. And from yesterday, and I don't know how much you've seen of this, but I thought one of the stories was Newcastle, who are now a year or so into the Saudi ownership. A lot of talk about that before the game, and then they go and get 5 goals and look a very different Newcastle to what they were when they were taken over. Have you any thoughts on that year and what that might mean to the future of the Premier League, where we love as many competitors? This team is probably not as loved at the moment because of the way the takeover has happened. But they're in there, aren't they? I mean, not title winners, but they're in there. They're now a wild card when they play against the big team.
Yeah, I mean, look, Newcastle have improved enormously. Eddie Howe's doing a good job. And the type of players they've signed, I think, are the right types to get them on that next level. They've not gone for...
Step by step,
yeah, they've not gone for that, what would be that ridiculous approach that sometimes you've seen in the past, where you go for these star player that's probably a little bit over the hill and all of a sudden it just looks a little bit messy and it looks a little bit like it's an owner in a sweet shop almost in some ways. There's been quite well thought out. The football project that's been put in place has been pretty good and sensible. And Newcastle, look, Martin, we were going up there for 12 years. It was, I won't say heartbreaking, because it's not heartbreaking, but it was rancid up there, wasn't it? It was just terrible for the fans. It was, the atmosphere was shocking between the manager at times, the players, the owner. It just felt like a toxic environment. And I have unbelievable memories of playing up at St James's Park in some of the greatest atmospheres that I've played football matches in this country, and some of the best football matches I've played in as well, and important ones around those mid-90s when they had, obviously, Kevin Keegan as the manager. Even when Bobby Robson was there, the atmosphere was fantastic and it was brilliant. But that was gone for so long under Mike Ashley's ownership. And then, obviously, the Saudi Arabians come in. And, look, the Newcastle fans, all they wanted was Ashley out and a new start and hope. So the positive, obviously, the massive positive of the change in ownership is the fact that these fans are now going to games with hope. They've got their Newcastle back in the sense of, the spirit in the club, the team playing in the spirit of the shirt that they want. However, it will always hang over them. The questions that have been asked: how did the Saudi Arabian ownership, how were they accepted into the Premier League? We don't know. There's no transparency. There's no independence. Talks of government being involved and things like that. What I would say is that I'm not against my conclusion has always been the same. I would rather work with these people, collaborate with them, but if they're going to come and own football clubs in our country, we should expect things in return. And that's access and ability to be able to ask questions. I don't think it's fair that Eddie Howe is having to stand there in front of cameras and answer the difficult questions when the ultimate owner of Newcastle, never have to show up. Same with the Glazer family at Manchester United, same with other owners at other clubs, whereby owners should be accessible to be able to be asked questions, almost like a common select committee twice a year, whereby you're able to push the difficult questions to them. And that's when you then are able to potentially influence change. And the reality is, I've always seen that Saudi Arabian, whether there's boxing matches over there, whether there's F1 over there, whether there's football ownership, this is a big question to ask. One that I've been asked myself this week. I've always said and maintained I'd rather be round the table with them and try and impact change and try and highlight issues than, say, on the other side of the fence where you don't let them in and, say, point to their issues. Because these are complex issues in the whole of the Middle East. There's a Qatar World Cup coming up. There's Saudi Arabian ownership. There's obviously there's Abu Dhabi ownership in Manchester and questions asked about that on a continuous basis. And the reality of it is these questions are not going to go away, but I don't believe they should be actually directed always to the football coach. The football coach has come there to work and to do his job as a football coach. He shouldn't have to answer the difficult questions all the time. I'm not saying he shouldn't get asked questions. Of course he should. He's a football manager for a huge football club. But the owners, the executives, they should be the ones that are taking these questions. And the Premier League as well, in my opinion, because the reality is they let the Saudi Arabian ownership in. However, I can't see how they couldn't let them in because they've already allowed state ownership with Abu Dhabi.
And it's a free market economy, and
that's what we live in.
The liberal society we like to live in.
Yeah.
I opened another door, Gary, just to finish off with here. Bournemouth being taken over by another American consortium.
Yeah.
Does it concern you in any way that we're probably up to 10 now full plus part ownerships from the United States, and that I think you need 14 to be totally influential? But is the game going that way, and should the game worry about it? Are they bringing the right kind of things in? A lot of razzmatazz and stuff that maybe young fans will be happy to go for, but there don't seem to be any English or British consortia to come out and if you like, fight for the tradition of the club.
No, I think I am worried because this morning in the Sunday newspapers there is a proposal on the table, we think coming from Spain again, that the Super League's going to come back. And they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop.
Well, they have to keep going.
These people don't take no for an answer. They don't take no for an answer. They get what they want in life, and they'll do whatever they can to get what they want. So that's where the regulation comes in that I've been calling for 2 or 3 years. There is a report that's been put forward by Tracy Crouch, who's did a brilliant job with the panel, and I believe we need protection in place, because I am concerned about... I'm not concerned about American ownership if we had rules and boundaries in place that would mean that we could stop Super Leagues or other radical proposals being brought forward without consensus across the pyramid and across the game. However, you said it, Martin, we need 14 votes, I think, in the Premier League to get something through that would constitutionally change the game. I think the FA do have a golden share. They do. But are they going to go against the will of the clubs? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. However, I would say that for me, the American mindset of sport is different than the English mindset in terms of relegation and promotion, how we see the pyramid, the strength of the game. They want the elite to be at the top, to always play each other, a little bit like Super League was, a fixed league whereby you just get the same people all the time. We don't want that. We don't need that. So I am concerned by it. I am concerned about the fact that you've got 15 billionaire owners around Europe who were willing to sign a piece of paper, or 12 billionaire owners around Europe who were willing to sign a piece of paper, which would have been the death knell for European football. It would have destroyed it, and it would have really, to be fair, changed the game immeasurably and in a negative way forever. Those people are still in charge of those football clubs, and they're still going to manoeuvre forward to a position whereby they get what they want, because that's the way they work. And we have to protect against that, particularly in this country. You know, this is the crown jewel, really, the Premier League.
We've just seen the wonderful example. I hate using the word product, but it fits this conversation. What a great example of how the product is.
Well, imagine this game. Look, Martin, this year...
Mind you, 2 clubs owned by Americans.
Yeah, but six clubs in the Premier League signed up to the European Super League so that they were always in the top competition. Yeah. 2 of those clubs, as a minimum, are not going to be in that competition next season, because we have a very competitive environment and landscape here, where Liverpool can be the second best team in the country for the last 5 years, but now they're looking like they're really under pressure for Champions League. Imagine if Super League had come in. Liverpool could have sat there today, lost against Arsenal, be wherever they are in the table. I've not seen the league table since the end of the game, and they'd be thinking, oh, it's all right, we're in the Champions League, we're okay, we're in the best competition, we'd get the money. That's not what we do here. So I am concerned just generally about it. Not just that, the fact that the Premier League haven't come forward with a package for the EFL yet, which is, to be fair, something that has been supposedly been on the table, or should have been on the table, for 12 months. They've been urged by government, the Premier League, to come and speak to the EFL to make sure that they bring forward a new distribution. They've not done that. We want a fit and proper owners test that has independence and transparency around it, so we know how the Saudi Arabian ownership and how other ownerships are accepted into English football, and there is clear criteria. There are many other things in terms of how we want to deal with the game moving forward that are important. Sustainability, a question of whether actually sustainability is your revenue and then there can be an owner funding top-up, or whether actually we have to live by the fact that the revenue that you generate in the club. They're questions that need to be asked by the game. And I have to say that there's definitely been pressure. You look at Derby and what's happened with them. We nearly lost one of the great clubs of English football through the fact that there's not proper regulation and proper rules in place to stop these things happening. So I am concerned about, just generally, the fact that we are potentially under attack from vested interest, from greed, that want to take the game in a direction which wouldn't be good for the pyramid. I am concerned by that, very concerned.
How close are we to a regulator being appointed?
I'm not sure we're that close, because a couple of things. One, we don't know yet the position of the new government. There is rumour that we know that Liz Truss and her government don't like, in an ideological way, regulation. They want to deregulate rather than regulate, so there's potentially an issue there. But I think also, being fair, and secondly, there are massive issues impacting this country at this moment in time. Cost of living, inflation, the economy, energy crisis, all those things that are massive issues, mortgage increases, that things just really are painful for tens and tens of millions of people, and that's the priority. And so in terms of obviously what the government will be looking at in terms of this immediate period, with obviously a very short period of only 18 months to 2 years to the general election, do they see football as being a priority? I'd like to think that they understand that those issues, those big issues I've just mentioned, can be dealt with, but that actually football is massively important to everybody in this country. When you think of the role that football played in coming out of the pandemic, in terms of people saying that, football, we were the first to return, if you remember, and everybody wanted football back just to give them that release and that relief of obviously what was a difficult situation for most people in this country. And I have to say that, football in its tens and tens of millions, whether it's the Lionesses in the summer, whether it be the Euros when England gets the final, whether it be the brilliant Premier League that we have, whether it be the pyramid that we just love, and obviously all the sort of the competitiveness there, it's probably one of the most important aspects.
It's precious.
It's very precious in this country, football. It's precious around the world. It gives people that something to look forward to at the weekend or in a night, whereby they build their weekends around it. It's not just us. People build their weekends around football because they love it. They speak about it. They argue with us on Twitter about it. They argue and debate on radio channels. They tune in to watch it all over the world, whether you're in Brazil on a beach playing as a young kid or whether you're in a park in Bolton playing as a young kid. It's something that gives everybody around the world, a lot of young girls and boys, men and women around the world, incredible positive feeling. So can we deal with this? Because I think it's important. And one thing we can't do is allow it to be taken away from us with some sort of what would be major change, because we're a little bit slow in dealing with regulating the game or putting rules in place which mean that we can't have the Real Madrids and Barcelonas and Juventuses of this world tugging at what's important over to us in this country, or American ownership who believe in franchise football and, they don't believe in the pyramid. I know they say they do, but they don't. Because they own American football teams and baseball franchises, these owners, and they like the fact that they're always in there. They don't want the idea of being demoted to another league or having income taken away from them. They want certainty. They want the best incomes. They want it all for themselves. And that's something that we've got to make sure we protect against.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.